Welcome to the lecture on economic perspectives on intellectual property right. In this lecture, we will have a very independent discussion on how some of the economic theories are involved and some of the economic principles are involved related to the intellectual property rights. The outline of this presentation is the introduction, IPR and economics of public goods, IPR and innovation, marginal cost pricing and intellectual property rights, and trade and intellectual property rights. So, let me begin with the introduction that as we have repeatedly discussed that intellectual property right is not only a legal issue, but also it is an economic, social, philosophical and political issue. So, it is being studied from legal and philosophical as well as economic perspective. As philosophical perspective have been applied by the philosophers and legal scholars to the realm of intellectual property, likewise economists have also viewed intellectual property rights as one of the applied economic perspective to the realm of intellectual property. So, what is basically this economic perspective involved in intellectual property rights? Economists have tried to understand the complicated relationship between intellectual property protection and incentives for innovation and diffusion. So, they relate intellectual property with various economic dimensions like economics of innovation, economics of innovations, issues related to the trade, international trade, issues related to the public goods. I will try to give you the idea that what is public goods and how it is different from the private goods, and marginal cost pricing, and economic growth, welfare, monopoly, economics of risk, economics of utility and cost benefit analysis. So, but here let me first begin this particular discussion with the term public goods. What do you mean? What we mean by the public goods, and how it is different from the private goods. When we say public goods, there are two merits of public goods. One is the non-excludability and other one is the non-rival in consumption. So, what is non-excludability? When we say non-excludability, it means that when consumer is consuming the product, when it is excludable product, when A consumes a product, suppose an apple is consumed by consumer A. So, when this particular apple is, or the fruits is consumed by A, B cannot consume this because it is this particular product is non-excludable in nature. So, the moment A has consumed, B has lost the opportunity to consume this. But the point is intellectual property rights is having the characteristics of public goods. The private goods are those goods which is excludable in nature. I gave you the example of an apple which is consumed by person A, but it is not consumed by person B. So, this particular example is the example of private goods, while the street light in the city is the example of public goods when street light is used by anybody, any one consumer. It cannot be excluded for the consumption for the other consumers or other person living in the same city, because the public goods cannot be excludable, like the defense, country's defense. If the defense is provided to the citizens of a country, we cannot say that defense is only provided to citizen A, B, C, and it is not provided to D, because the non-excludability involved in this. And then in the private goods, we have the rivalry in consumption. Whosoever will be the first one to consume, they will be the first one to consume it, and the people who are not ready to be on time and not punctual to get the product, they are not really real beneficiaries in terms of consumption. So suppose a restaurant is open till 9 o'clock in the evening or 10 o'clock in the evening. The person who is reaching at 10:30 or 11, they might be not be the person to get the consumption, because there is a rivalry in reaching the restaurant, and there is a rivalry in consumption of the food. One cannot really think to go there after a certain time. So the private goods and public goods are having two this particular 2 points makes a product private as well as makes the product different from the private to public. So the public goods are having this merit of non-excludability and non-rivalness. It leads to the undersupply of creative works, especially in intellectual property rights, which is knowledge process characteristics of public goods. It is just like the public goods, because it leads to the undersupply of creative works by private market, that is called market failure. So if you see here the interlinkages, knowledge processing features of public goods like non-excludability and non-rivalry, this underinvestment in the creation of knowledge, problem of free ride and externalities, and because of this less than optimum level of invention and creativity or market failure. So everybody do not want to invest in intellectual property sector. Why? Because the moment you are investing in IPR sector, intellectual property sector, when we are investment in if there is a certain investment in IPR sector, you have to have a system to stop the free riders. If you don't have any system to stop the free riding or free riders in intellectual property right system, then whatever investment you are having, that entire investment is facing the risk, that is the investment risk. Investment risk involved in IPR. So the moment you are investing, you want incentive on that investment, but the point is your investment is at high risk, because there is a chances for the free riding, there is a chances for infringement, there is chances for piracy, and a small piracy may give you a big loss, may provide you the big loss. So this particular aspect, the public goods and IPR is just like the public goods, because everybody wants to consume it, but everybody do not want to pay for it. This is especially happening in the sectors like music, books, and especially the copyright sectors are facing this problem. Also the patented items, pharmaceutical industries are facing tough time today, because they are having huge R&D expenditure, but ultimately all these expenditures are not going to give them a better return, because lots of piracy and parallel industries are working together, and they are not really having the patent rights or the license to produce such medicines and pharmaceuticals. So that way we find that it is a very tough time for the owner of intellectual property rights to continue with the economic gain, because there are certain risks involved in the protection of intellectual property. So investors are not really keen to invest, and that creates the problem of market failure, because you have lots of demand for such products, but the supplier for such products are not in plenty, because investors are not ready to invest. Everybody do not want to become the investors in the IPR sector because of the high risk involved, and the way these IPR products are like the public goods. So the second point which I would also like to discuss here, the economics of innovations included in the intellectual property rights. So IPR as an incentive for the innovators. So the one side is one side you can find out that how IPR is an incentive for the innovation, and other side we are finding that IPR as a restriction for the innovations. So how it is incentive for the innovation? When we say incentive, the IPR protects and stimulates the innovations and inventions by giving return on the innovator's investment, by disclosing knowledge and the information. It plays a significant role in innovation system. It also protects the innovative firms from spillover. But when we say the second aspect, second part of this IPR, intellectual property rights and its relationship with innovation, we find that IPR impede innovations by restricting use of knowledge, by generating monopoly power, by imposing short run cost, by creating difficulties in the determination of boundaries, and that leads to the distortion in the pattern of innovation. So innovators, once innovated something, is not free to disclose the information. Innovations are when it is in the umbrella of, under the umbrella of intellectual property rights, they are supposed to preserve that knowledge and restrict that knowledge with their own and at the same time it really provides the monopoly power to the innovator for some years by imposing certain cost involved in it, and by creating difficulties in the determination of the boundaries. And there are certain boundaries, there are certain restrictions, there are certain rules which every owner has to follow. So innovators are not really free to have their, not really free to think and to act whatever they feel, but they have to basically act, and they have to basically work under a limited under a very limited setup. They cannot really have they cannot really have their thinking or their innovations without any boundaries. So this is the second perspective on intellectual property rights. Thus the best part of this innovation and IPR relation is the trade-off between the social benefits of improved innovations and the social cost of restricted usage of innovation determines the optimum level of patent protection, for example in patent. And there are abusive and anti-competitive use of IPR, problem of finance, problem issues related to finance is one of the issues, and revenue does not go to the finance for research. Drug companies spend more money on advertisement and marketing than they do on research. These are the issues which come up based on the recent discussion on intellectual property rights, and you must watch some of the video link which is available here. And why we want to bring these issues here, because when we say the economic perspective on intellectual property right, we cannot really ignore some of the facts which is really connected with the current day current business model of the various companies. And we see that lots of cost and advertisement and lots of activities are really hampering, and that is not really favoring the innovators and the innovation sector, but that basically directly gives the benefit to the businessmen who really launching the IPR products to the world market today. So when we see here the IPR and marginal cost pricing, we find here that every unit of the new product, especially the products related to patent or product related to trademark, is not really having a new cost of intellectual property. Even if we add something, it is not like we are adding a new cost of new marginal cost to the new marginal cost of intellectual property. So what is basically marginal cost? When we see here, marginal cost is nothing except the delta change in cost divided by the delta change in the quantity. So if we include a one unit in our production, what is basically the change in the cost of the production? That is basically the marginal cost. So when we see here, no marginal cost is associated with the use of knowledge, because its characteristics of non-rivalness and non-excludability. So especially the IPR products, if we have IPR products launched in the market, and if we are adding more quantity here, instead of 100, if we are producing 200 quantity of IPR products, it does not add much value, especially much value of IPR cost for the producer, because once you have the patent, you have trademark, registered trademark, once you have the patents and trademark or other intellectual property rights, even if you are changing the quantity, it is not going to really change the marginal cost of having the intellectual property rights in your hand. So intellectual property for a formula, for a design, for a product, for a medicine, is the intellectual property for many years for you to produce as much as you want to produce. So there is no additional marginal cost of intellectual property for your product. So IPR promotes monopoly, which leads to charge price more than the marginal cost. So the price of the product will not be equal to marginal cost. Why? Because you know that you are the single producer in the market, single producer in the market. The moment you are the single producer in the market, so you are not basically having any competition in the market. The patent owner is not having any competition in the market for some specific years. So price is going to always higher than the marginal cost, as it happens in the monopoly. So when the price is going to have marginal higher than the marginal cost, the larger the difference between the price and marginal cost. So whatever the difference, price minus marginal cost, whatever difference you are having, the larger the profit incur. So you will always have profit. So the profit is nothing except the marginal revenue minus the marginal cost, or maybe the revenue minus cost. So whatever per unit of revenue you are having and per unit of cost you are having, that is the profit which you are earning. So more you have the difference with the marginal cost, more you have the difference with the marginal cost, more the price is higher from the marginal cost, you are having more greater benefits and profits. So marginal cost pricing on the one hand would maximize dissemination of information and prevent inefficient entry by firms, but on the other hand would disincentivize to create the property in first place. So it is not so easy to produce, as we have discussed in our first slide, that intellectual property, investment in intellectual property rights are not so good, not so easy, because intellectual property rights are are similar to the public goods, are having the nature, are basically having the characteristics of public goods, and there isn't any scope to protect those intellectual property rights if the legal setup of that particular economy is not really strict. So the incentives are very much less compared to other industry where compared to other sectors where you do not really need a very tight intellectual property protection system. So this is another perspective on intellectual property. The next one is the trade and intellectual property rights. So when we say trade, trade is the exchange of goods and services. When we say international trade, international trade includes the exchange of goods and services among the countries, between the countries, and at the cross national level. So international trade spread the benefits of innovations beyond national boundaries, because the moment you are going out from the country, the moment you are breaking the domestic boundary and your goods and services are reaching outside the economy, you are reaching other countries of the world, you are extending the benefits of your trade to other part of the economy. Your market is extended to other economies of the world, so you are not inside the domestic economy, but you are basically targeting outside the domestic economy. So cross border externalities, you are getting externalities generated by one country's IPR protection on the other countries because of the mobility of knowledge and information across the national boundaries. So IPR and the competitive advantage, intellectual property rights are placing a very new framework of competitiveness. We have seen in our previous lecture that when we were having intellectual property rights protected at the domestic level, the value of those intellectual property products were limited to that economy only. But when we have a global system of intellectual property rights today, our products are not only protected at local level, but it is protected at the international level. As at the same time, our products are not only challenged at domestic level, but it is also challenged at international level. So we have global challenges, and we have global opportunities and global competitiveness today. So international exchange of goods and service happened because all products improvement takes place in developed region having competitive advantage in R&D, while underdeveloped region having competitive disadvantage try to intimate technological improvement. So we find that as we have discussed in our other lectures also, that every country is not at the same level of intellectual property rights, and they are not having the equal level playing field today. So the innovations and incentives and the competitiveness is also not at the same level. They differ in their quality of the product, they differ in their protection of intellectual property rights, and so they differ in the incentives and innovations. So the international trade, the opportunities involved in international trade today places IPR products on a very different stage, and every country is now aware, every economy is now aware that how much a country can really earn with the protection of intellectual property rights, but all depends on the R&D, all depends on how secure your investment in intellectual property rights, and how secure and how safe you are having the intellectual property system. So IPR and factor endowments, generally developed countries having greater capacity of innovation because of more skill endowments and technical know-how, which produce high technology goods and services, while developing country produce low technology products because of having less skill and technical know-how. So a clear economic perspective on IPR could be useful to the policy makers for decision making on this matter. When we see that different economic perspectives are involved in intellectual property rights in terms of public goods, in terms of trade, in terms of innovations, in terms of economics related to marginal cost and the difference between the price and marginal cost, we find that intellectual property right sector is one of the challenging sector, and this sector has lots of risk. At the same time, this sector is having lots of benefit because it allow you to get more and more price of your product if you are in the condition to bear the risk. So while the growing importance of innovation and knowledge, the economic debates have basically melded with social, political and philosophical discourse, but the economic discourse and discussion is going to lead all these discussions, because most of the firms, the intellectual property rights has the business implications, it has the trade implications today, and so the most of the firms who basically wish to lead the world, who basically wish to monopolize the world, the firms which really wants to become the leader in the market, they are trying hard to protect the intellectual property rights, and they are really looking for those countries and those economies where IP, a better intellectual property regime exists, and they are trying to really protect the interest of the investors in such economies. I hope this perspective is going to give you a brief idea about how some of the economic points, economic concepts are included in the intellectual property rights today, and one cannot really forget the economic perspectives involved in intellectual property right. Thank you.